Hey guys, how you doing? It's Tom. For those of you who follow my channel closely, you know that I always say that we can't root for politicians the same way we root for football teams. Party allegiance, Democrat, Republican, the two-party paradigm. Allegiance to politicians, treating them like they're rock stars, is detrimental to the present and the future of the United States of America. The problem is that it creates a society of people who lack principles. And without principles, what are we as a nation? It creates a society of people who completely lack in free thought, and rather than thinking for themselves, simply get behind a politician and root for whatever that politician does. And this is a massive problem. I cannot overstate how big of a problem this is in the United States of America. Look at the military-industrial complex. Every 4 years, we have a new president come along and say they are going to be the anti-war president. Barack Obama ran as the complete opposite of George W. Bush. He was going to be the anti-war president. They gave him a Nobel Peace Prize so fast just from his words. And then Barack Obama spent 8 years dropping a bomb in the Middle East every 20 minutes. Do you know how many bombs that is? You do the math. How many innocent women and children died from a bomb dropping every 20 minutes in the Middle East? How much of our children's future did we sell off because every one of those bombs requires a tremendous amount of money, which requires a tremendous amount of debt. Debt we're taking against the future. It's called inflation. And we have to pay for that, and our children have to pay for that. How selfish can we be? So Obama runs as the anti-war president, and he drops a bomb every 20 minutes for 8 years, and he destabilizes Libya. He destabilizes Syria. And by the time he gets out of office, the American military is seemingly everywhere in the Middle East, if not everywhere in the world. Then President Trump comes along and runs as an anti-interventionalist. And so far, he knocks ISIS out of Syria, and the United States military is still in Syria. Well, I thought we were only there to defeat ISIS. So what are we doing there? Are we there fighting? Are we trying to achieve regime change? Are we there trying to take on the Russians, or the Russians are sided with Syria, right? You want to know about the anti-Russian narrative? Well, the United States, the oligarchs from the top, the big corporations are pushing regime change in Syria, the deep state, and Russia is their greatest backer. So that's where this stuff comes from. And Trump funds Saudi Arabia, sells them weapons, and provides support for the war taking place in Yemen. What is the United States of America doing in Yemen? Politicians come and go, but principles are eternal. The old saying was true then, just as it is true today. Give me liberty or give me death. So yesterday, President Trump went on national television and he criticized the NRA. He called for a ban of bump stocks and raising the age to buy a semi-automatic weapon from 18 to 21 years old. Now, many people who are Trump supporters have came to his defense on this issue. They say, oh, well, this is just common sense. There's mass shootings. There's danger. Do you not have a heart? Well, when he ran as the greatest defender of the Second Amendment this country has ever seen. Now, I knew that wasn't going to be true because I'm the greatest defender of the Second Amendment this country has ever seen. But he has completely abandoned that principle. Now, these criticisms of Trump doesn't mean I don't support him. To the contrary, I think he's done a lot of very good things for this country thus far. And I've covered them extensively, but that's not what this video is about. But that doesn't mean I won't criticize him where he abandons principles. Because if we don't criticize him, and we don't criticize politicians who abandon the principles that they run on in any area, and I understand that none of them are going to be perfect. I didn't think Trump was going to achieve everything he said he was going to. Just the very nature of pulling out of the TPP. Just the very getting us out of the Paris Climate Agreement and keeping American sovereignty. Lowering taxes. These are phenomenal things. And I didn't think he would keep to all his promises, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to criticize him openly and let people know that I think it's a problem when he abandons some of the principles that made me support him in the first place. We must choose principles over party. We must choose principles over allegiance to politicians. How can we as Americans get the country that we deserve if we as Americans don't have principles? Because if the country we deserve is based upon principles, we can't achieve that country if we ourselves don't have any principles. None of the changes that President Trump talked about, the banning of bump stocks, the raising of the age to buy guns from 18 to 21 years old, are going to make any meaningful change to stop future mass shootings, just as they wouldn't have stopped the mass shootings that have taken place. People who are willing to take a gun and kill 18, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 500 random people, by their very nature are willing to break the law. Criminals will buy guns whether it's legal or illegal, and they will find ways to do it. Just as the war on drugs hasn't stopped people from doing cocaine, just as the war on drugs hasn't stopped people from doing heroin, a war on guns will not stop people in the United States of America, what is alleged to be the land of the free and the home of the brave, from getting guns. I'm not so sure it's the home of the brave, because we as Americans continuously give in to fear. So how brave can we be? Because after 9/11, George Bush and the United States government came out and said that we need to take away your Fourth Amendment. We need to spy on you to keep you safe. Because aren't you afraid of the boogeyman with the turban? And Americans just gave away our Fourth Amendment. They said, yeah, take it. And they've done it again with the Freedom Act, the USA Liberty Act, which just passed again. And all we've seen since then is that fear, which was allegedly justified to keep Americans safe, used against actual Americans. Because Edward Snowden exposed the NSA. And he showed us that the NSA was doing blanket searches or blanket spying and keeping blanket data on almost every person in the United States of America. They're keeping your phone calls. They're violating your Fourth Amendment rights. And for those of you who say, oh, well, that's not a big deal, I'm not breaking the law, I've reported extensively on this. The spy state isn't designed to protect you from outside forces. The spy state is designed to protect those in power from those who are a threat to them. So take a journalist, for example. Maybe take someone like Seth Rich, who leaks the DNC emails to WikiLeaks. That could get you killed. Someone like Michael Hastings, who has damaging information on what we believe to be the director of the CIA. That gets him killed. And if you're not doing anything, right, and you say, oh, well, they can't get anything on me. Well, say you're a journalist or someone like me. And then what they do is they find someone in your family who has broken some law, committed some felony, which isn't hard to do because the law books are so wildly out of control that virtually everything's illegal. I mean, they say that people seldom go one day without committing a felony. They just don't know it because it's so hard, because there's just so many laws on the books. So they find someone you care about and they say, I'm going to throw this person in prison unless you become my bitch. And that protects the powerful. So we continuously give in to fear because we don't have principles. And what we need in this country is a return to principles. Because Ben Franklin had principles. Thomas Paine had principles. Read Common Sense. One of the greatest pieces of literature the world has ever known. Because the truth is that mass shootings in America are down. They're at a 50-year low. That if you look at mass shooting deaths dating back to 2007, and don't quote me on the numbers, I'm just going off the top of my head here, but if you watch my report, The Truth About Gun Control, it's something like 50 people one year, 70 people die in mass shootings the next year, 30 people the next year, 100 people the next year, 35 people the next year, 63 people the next year. These are very minuscule numbers. It's like getting bit by a shark. Everyone's afraid of it, but it's very statistically unlikely. And yes, although we would like to prevent this because it is a tragedy, at what cost are you willing to give away our liberty for the idea of safety? Because by giving away the guns, you're not getting safety. Because if you look up the history of the world, the United States, democide, between the years 1900 and 1999, which is very recent history, governments killed 262 million of their own citizens. That's like the United States government killing United States citizens. The Soviet Union's government killing citizens of the Soviet Union. 262 million of their own citizens in just a 100-year period. Now that's a real threat. That's something tangible. Just look at American history. Slavery was a government program. Jim Crow was a government program. Right? Segregation was mandated by law by the United States government. Japanese Americans were locked up in internment camps. They were removed from their homes and locked in concentration camps in the United States of America. The Gulf of Tonkin was a lie, an admitted lie by the United States government used to get public support to escalate into the Vietnam War. How many brave Americans died in the Vietnam War? Babies in incubators. A lie using children, a false flag, was used to get public support to get America's entrance into the Gulf War. How many young Americans died in that war? 9/11. We know from the 28 pages that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Saudi Arabia was the main driver, the main foreign driver, I will say, behind the attacks of 9/11. How many young Americans died or lost a limb or came back with post-traumatic stress disorder, which only contributes to mental illness, which is the actual cause of all of these mass shootings in the United States of America? How many of these American citizens, these young people, had their lives destroyed by that lie, by the United States government and the mainstream media? How many innocent civilians in Iraq were killed by the American government based on that lie? Because everyone in Iraq who died from the American invasion was killed based on a lie from the mainstream media and the American government. A lot of blood on the hands of the American government. So what about the history of the last 100 years? What about the history of America suggests that Americans are safer by giving away our gun rights? It's emotional, it's illogical, and it's lacking in principle. And just look at the numbers I gave you on the mass shootings. 50 people this year, 100 people that year, 70 people that year. It's nothing. About 11,000 people die of homicide a year in the United States of America, and almost all of those people die because they're involved with gang violence. If you don't join a gang, if you're not a Blood or a Crip in the United States of America, you're not going to get shot and killed. I mean, yeah, it could happen, but that's a shark bite. It's getting struck by lightning. We are giving in to fear, and we are giving away our rights. Look at what's happening in South Africa. Democracy. Parliament in South Africa just made an amendment to the Constitution giving the government the authority to confiscate all white-owned land. And they're not going to give the farmers or anyone who owns land that's white any compensation. They're just going to take everything they have, throw them out on the streets. If these people fight back, they'll be imprisoned or they'll be executed. Tell me that can't happen here. Tell me we should give up our guns. Stop being ruled by emotions. Stop with this blank allegiance, this football team allegiance to political parties, to politicians. Because the survival of Western civilization, the survival of freedom in the world, the survival of liberty, prosperity, and the pursuit of happiness depends completely on how principled the people of America are willing to be. Thank you so much for your support. Please share this link. My message is about philosophy, about logic and reason, about how to think, not what to think. If you disagree with me, challenge me in the comments, that's fine. I hope you share this link. If you want to support me financially before YouTube throws me off their channel, so please follow me on Twitter, TomFFRnews, Tom Anderson on Facebook, FFRnews on Facebook, Tom Anderson on Gab. Please, please, please just follow me on my other platforms. If you don't want to see my tweets, fine, but if they throw me off of YouTube, I need to be able to let you know where I sprung back up. I think I'm going to get onto DTube. That's a YouTube-type platform. I am on Steemit. I blog on there. I strongly suggest you get on that platform. I really like that platform. And if you want to support me financially, www.patreon.com/FFRnews. For as little as $1 a month, you empower me. Because if you want your principles to stand, then you need people to fight for those principles. Because make no mistake, I don't do this for my health, right? When that day comes that the government does decide, it does become too tyrannical and starts rounding people up, the first people they're going to round up are people like me, right? People dumb enough to put these ideas out on YouTube. But I don't care. Because I want the children to grow up in a better world. Because that's what people before me did. Because that's what these two did. Because that's what Ben Franklin did. Because that's what Thomas Jefferson did. Because that's what George Washington did up there. Because most people go through this life and they're no one, but very few people change the world. So I'm going to fight for my principles. I'm going to fight for Western civilization. And if they match up with your principles, then help me. Go on Patreon, throw a couple dollars a month my way, and help me fight for Western civilization. Because I'm not going down without a fight. It's not going to happen. We're going to leave this world a better place than the way we found it. Thank you so much, guys.